Hello and welcome to TheAIbumMan, and this is going to be a CDs and vinyl I bought, well, not really that recently. This is just going to be some of the highlights that things that I picked up while I was on my hiatus. Obviously, if I showed everything that I picked up in that time, then we would probably be here all day and this would be an exceptionally long video. So here's just some of the highlights, some of the cool things that you guys may find interesting. So I'll begin with the CDs. There's not too many CDs here that I thought really, of note. So the album I would like to talk about a bit is this, Sufjan Stevens' Illinois. This is an album I've just absolutely fallen in love with. I've been listening to this an almost infinite amount of times, it seems, since I picked it up. So if you don't know who Sufjan Stevens is, he's an American from Illinois, I think. I don't know where in Illinois though, but yeah. And basically, he makes indie folk type music. He's liked, I suppose you could say, by a hipster quote-unquote crowd. But I think he has a really interesting style to him. He has this, he has a very simple style at his nature. All of these just have sort of very easy chord progressions, just sort of 4 chords in a row, played over and over and over again. Take a song like the beautiful John Wayne Gacy Jr., and yes, to make a song about such a brutal serial killer so beautiful is just wonderful in itself. Or something like the predatory wasp of the Palisades is out to get us, Chicago or Kazmai Polanski Day. Very simple chord progressions, but with these lush arrangements, interesting use of instruments from banjos, acoustic guitars, electric guitars, a lot of stuff in there. But it's really his lyrics and his vocal delivery that make this such a wonderful album. The lyrics on Chicago, Jacksonville, they have a lot to do. The concept is about the state of Illinois. Well, it's not a state I particularly know much about. Well, sound like Jacksonville's full of dense references. This is just a really beautiful, very pretty album, and it does have what I think is probably the longest song title I've ever seen in my life. Track 2 is genuinely called this, The Black Hawk War, or How to Demolish an Entire Civilization, Still Feel Good About Yourself in the Morning, or We Apologise for the Inconvenience, but you're going to have to leave now, or I fought the big knives and will continue to fight them off until they are off our lands. What a title. Next, we have something rather different. This is Swans, To Be Kind. This was many people's favourite album of 2014, and this was in my top 10 for 2014 as well. This is a wonderful album. Swans are wonderful bands. I'm going to be seeing them in the London Roundhouse later this year in October, and I cannot wait. I have not heard the new album as of the time of recording this, unfortunately. Need to just get some new headphones before I listen to that. But this is wonderful. This is a long album. This is a 2-hour album by the legends from New York, I think, Swans, who you can kind of say were no wave band. They're sort of the anti-punk. They have some of that rawness of punk, but yet with very long songs. The longest song on here, Toussaint Louverture, is about half an hour long. This is something that's really quite difficult to describe. It's visceral, in your face, ferocious at times, but also very atmospheric. And it's something I really recommend listening to. I mean, to listen to the whole 2-hour album, many people might not do that, but certainly hear the track Screenshot. I'd say that is worth a go. Or A Little God in My Hands. Those 2 songs, they're a lot more accessible, I suppose. Next, from the Canadian prog maestro, this is Epicloud by the Devin Townsend Project. I've been collecting quite a few Devin Townsend albums recently, and so, mixed degrees of liking. Ziltoid, I think, is so overrated. But Epicloud, I think, is probably my favourite. This is, to me, the perfect combination of his heavier style. It definitely has a lot of metal in it, but it also has grand opera, massive, over-the-top vocals. It's very power metal-esque, I suppose, in a lot of ways, with just how over-the-top this album can be at times, with a lot of delicate sections, with female vocals. It's just such a varied, fun, in-your-face, but also proggy album. Pretty cool. A band I've been listening to a lot recently, Gvelletak. These are Norwegian kind of, some people call them black and roll because they have black metal and rock and roll elements. I'm not a big fan of that genre tag. I don't think they really take that much from the 50s. Instead, I would call this more sort of classic rock mixed with black metal. So you have black metal vocals, and they're not quite as inaccessible as something like Dark Throne, but you're not really going to understand a word of this, and even if you did kind of hear the stuff, it's all in Norwegian. So again, you're probably not going to understand that much. It's the instrumentation that makes this. Guitar harmonies, very catchy guitar melodies, and sure, while it's a very growly album, to any classic rock fan, I'd really recommend this one. The Book of Souls by Iron Maiden. This is the hardback version, pretty cool version of it. How could I not pick up this album? Iron Maiden's new album. I'm sure you know all about it already, but this is certainly a nice edition of it. So let's begin with the vinyl records. First up, we have Show No Mercy by Slayer, their brutal debut album, which, well, originally the production was utterly terrible on this, but luckily this is a sort of a later master of it, which also includes a couple of bonus tracks, Aggressive Perfector and Chemical Warfare, which were released on an EP or singles, I can't quite remember. But it's cool because Chemical Warfare is one of my all-time favourite Slayer tracks, and not something that's particularly easy to find on an album, and it's just a really nice edition of it. Picked this up when I was in Athens. It's a double gatefold, and it's actually, yeah, it's a double album as well. Sounds pretty decent. The production's a little ropey still, because, I mean, the early Slayer albums were not wonderful. I do like the remasters, which were done, I don't know when, but however many years ago. I think they're pretty cool on CD, but this is still a nice thing to have. Next up, we have something that was really cool for the price. This is Miles Davis's Kind of Blue on 180 gram vinyl in stereo. It would have been nice if it was in mono, but you know, we can't have everything. But no, this came with this magazine called 33 1/3, which is sort of this monthly jazz subscription thing, and well, it's like 10 quid a month, which is certainly far more than I can afford. The first issue was like $4.99 or something. It's like $4.99 for one of the greatest jazz albums ever on 180 gram vinyl. Hell yes, this sounds absolutely beautiful. Love this record. It's a classic. My second favourite jazz album, my first, is Charles Mingus's The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady. But still, this is a very, very close second. Okay, next up we have Ghost's latest record, Melly Laura. This is one that sounds super, super cool on vinyl. And this is honestly the best album I think Ghost have ever done. It's the most varied, most interesting, and songs like Cerise, From the Pinnacle to the Pit, Absolution are so bloody anthemic, so catchy. Seen them live twice on this tour. We meant to see them a third time at Download Festival, but unfortunately they cancelled at the last minute because Papa Emeritus had laryngitis, which is a bit of a shame, but yeah, still just one of the best bands in modern rock, to be honest. If you haven't heard Ghosts, then I don't know what you're playing at. Something a bit more classic. Power Slave by Iron Maiden. I remember I found this in a car boot sale last summer for literally like £1, and it's in really, really nice condition. I don't really need to say much about Power Slave. I will say I've always found it a tad overrated. Yeah, I know. I think Number of the Beast is far superior. Seven Son is a lot superior, and even Somewhere in Time. The problem I've always had with this album is Flash the Blade and the Duelist, the two sword songs, and then I don't think Back in the Village is amazing, and Rime of the Ancient Mariner I'm not a huge fan of. It's alright, but I don't think it's as good as other epics like Empire of the Clouds on Book of Souls, or Alexander the Great on Somewhere in Time, When the Wild Wind Blows on Final Frontier. It's a good album, you know, I enjoy it. Obviously 2 Minutes to Midnight, Aces High, and to us even Lost for Words, the bloody Steve Harris instrumental. I don't think it's as strong as everyone else seems to. Many people call it their best album. It's a good album, but hey, Peace of Mind's better. This was a really cool thing to find. Found this in London, I think, somewhere. This is Riot's Rock City. Riot are not a band you often see on vinyl. This is kind of a rare thing with their little seal mascot, which adorns every album. Lars Ulrich of Metallica has often talked about the influence this band had on him, and these was sort of an ill-fated, unlucky rock band, you know. They were sort of, it seemed they could become the next big thing, but due to tragedy, and I can't remember their full story, but a lot of random things happened to this band, which meant they just never quite made it. They always stayed maybe probably a third-tier band, but for any hardcore classic rock fans, these are good, solid albums. I'm not saying this is going to be one of the greatest albums you're ever going to hear, but if you ever see it and you enjoy classic rock, this is a really strong album. Something that's unbelievably cool next. Bob Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited on mono vinyl. Oh yes, if you're going for the 60s Dylan, you have to go mono, or what's the point? Okay, there's still a point, because they're some of the greatest albums ever, whatever they're in. But for me, I've been wanting to collect all the 60s Dylan albums in mono for a while, and it's slow going because, dear God, are they expensive. But this was super cheap. This was like £8 in this store called Reckless Records in London. And why was it so cheap considering it's original mono? Well, because it's quite scratched. It is very scratched, and you do hear some crackles and hisses and pops through it. It is a bit like eating Rice Krispies while listening to Desolation Row. But I still love the sound of this thing. It's original from 1965, has that beautiful warmth to it. Dylan's voice just sounds so much better on vinyl. I mean, this album's a masterpiece no matter what you listen to it on. You could listen to it through a potato and it'd still be unbelievably majestic. But on mono vinyl, hell yes. Something very different to Dylan. Yngwie Malmsteen's Rising Force. One of my favourite Yngwie albums. I've never been a huge Yngwie fan. There's type of shredding guitars, him, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani. I enjoy them from time to time, but I can get a bit overwhelmed by guitars that are so unbelievably self-indulgent. But this album has Jolene Turner on it, who I think is one of the great underrated vocalists. Classic rock, like his stuff with Deep Purple a lot, Slaves and Masters, pretty underrated. His stuff with Rainbow was really good, very strong voice, amazing vocal range, and I do think that this and Trilogy, these are really the two essential Yngwie albums, in my opinion. Now into the Court of the Crimson King. No, I haven't got the debut, but I have got the second album, In the Wake of Poseidon. This is something I picked up in Athens, and this is pretty cool because it's also on blue vinyl, which is nice. And vinyl release will say, oh, well, coloured vinyl doesn't sound as good as black vinyl. I've never noticed too much of a difference when it comes to coloured vinyl and black vinyl. This is 180 grams as well. I think this is a pretty recent one. It sounds remastered, but I can't find out much about it, though I'm not entirely sure. Underrated album from King Crimson. People talk about King Crimson, they're always like, oh, In the Court of the Crimson King, Red, Lux, Tongues and Aspect. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful albums. This is often derided because it sounds a bit, it's a very much a continuation of their first album. Everything else they ever made was consistently different, but this is a continuation of their first one. Gregor Lake on vocals, a lot of the distorted stuff. Something like Pictures of a City can be derided as a 21st Century Schizoid Man knockoff, but I think that's right. Okay, sure, they made another album that was a bit like another one of their albums. Wow, okay, I know we expect constant experimentation from King Crimson, but they've delivered such a varied discography. Let's let them off, because this is a bloody strong album. I mean, no one bats an eyelid when AC/DC released the same album over and over and over and over again, ad nauseum. But this is still bloody good stuff. If you like King Crimson, this is a lot more accessible than certainly something like Lizard and some of their later stuff, which I love as a huge prog fan, but I can see why. Okay, this does have cat food, which is good, but harder to grasp. But if you like that debut album, listen to this. I think you'll really, really enjoy this. Then King Crimson album, I have not, unfortunately, listened to yet. Discipline, from that 80s era. I hear decent stuff about this. I mean, I know Elephant Talk, that's cool. And this, it has Adrian Bello and Bill Bruford, Tony Levin. Really strong lineup. I look forward to hearing this, because I never really had too much 80s Crimson. So that will be interesting. On to another prog legend, Mr. Frank Zappa. So first we have Overnight Sensation, which is, I think, credited to both the Mothers and Frank Zappa. Yes, it is. And this is one of my favourite Zappa tunes, Camarillo Brillo. Yeah, it's very standard by the numbers rock, but it's a fun song, and this is a fun album. If you want to know where to begin with Frank Zappa and you're a bit intimidated by his other stuff, because he has such a ridiculously big catalogue and some really weird out there stuff, this is a really good introduction. It shows his humour with things like Zombie Wolf, Diana Moham, Camarillo Brillo, which is something you have to get used to if you're going to get into Zappa. But this also is a lot more traditional blues rock. There's none too fancy, none too proggy. Sure, some that has jams like on Montana, but you really appreciate why Zappa is such a wonderful guitarist. Sure, Hot Rats is the best thing he ever did, but this is a really good album. And then I also got the accompanying album for 180 gram vinyl, Apostrophe. This was made in the same session, I think, or similar session, but it's just credited to Frank Zappa. And another one of my favourites. Again, it's more simple, straight down the road Zappa, but aside from it does have this track Apostrophe, the title track, which has Jack Bruce on bass and Jim Gordon on drums, who I think worked with Derek and the Dominoes. They don't quote me on that, but that's an amazing song. That's a really cool proggy jam. This has one of his most famous tunes